Okay, it looks like we are live. Just wait for people to start joining.
Excellent.
Just a couple minutes. Already get, oh, wow, more than 30 viewers, 47 viewers. Amazing. We got a ton of people joining now. Great.
Do we have any elevator music to welcome them in?
No, I don't. I wasn't prepared. Let me check my Spotify if I have something. Okay, so let's just welcome everyone to this Photography on Safari webinar. And before we start, before I introduce my guest, to everyone who is watching on the page on my site at www.ucphoto.me/safari/live, there's a little link at the bottom of this video which says if you want to see this, watch this in another window and access the live chat, click here. If you do that, it will open a YouTube live window, but most of all, there's a little tab on the right that says live chat, and you can use that to send us your questions that we'll try to answer as many as possible during this webinar. We've allotted the time of about 1 hour for it, but depending on how many questions we get, we might even go a little bit above that. And please tell us where you're from. I'm already seeing some messages here. We got Ernst from, is that right? It's a bit far from here, Belfair, Washington, and Brenda from Vancouver, Robert from Seattle, and there was somebody else from Germany. That's Severin. Okay, good. So let me just introduce my guest for this webinar. The amazing, extraordinary travel photographer and founder of Discovery Photo Tours, Ken Kaminesky, who is connecting with us from his home in New York City. Hi, Ken. What's up?
Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure for me to have you as a guest. So how's the weather there? I know you had a big storm that part of the world. How was the
I'm
storm?
originally from Canada, and these kinds of storms don't faze us very much. It's actually been really beautiful weather the last couple of days here, and I was in New York City just the very day after that so-called storm, and it was just an absolute gorgeous day to be walking around, and there's lots more storms to come, so this is just the first of them. Winter is coming.
Better be prepared. Right. Anyway, we're going to talk about a little bit warmer places for this webinar. We're going to talk about wildlife. We're going to talk about specifically photo safaris, right? And which usually happen in Africa, which happens to be a little bit warmer than New York or either Italy in the winter. I know you've been to Africa on safaris a number of times. You were recently in Tanzania, right?
Absolutely. So we spent the last 2 weeks of August and first 2 weeks of September in Tanzania doing 2 incredible safaris in 2018. We had incredibly great luck and good success in capturing all sorts of beautiful animals and various kinds of incarnations and scenes that just seem like a dream now when I look back on it, and I'm really excited about going back next year.
All right, let's go straight into the questions that I have prepared for you, because we just have a little bit about 1 hour we wanted to dedicate to this, and leave also some time for the viewers' questions. So let's start by talking about the difference between the typical tourist safari, where you go to something that is not specifically designed for photographers, and photo safaris, which I know people who are watching this are probably more interested in the latter, and they would like to know what's the advantage of going on a photo safari as opposed to a non-photo safari, where of course you can take photos, but it's probably organized a little bit differently.
I can't speak too much in terms of what happens specifically on non-photo safaris, but I can tell you what we do on top of them, which you can't do on a regular safari. So, for example, on our tours, on our safaris, we're going to have beautiful new 2018 Toyota Land Cruisers that are completely fitted, customized for the needs of all the guests that we take. We have a guide who is an expert local guide who speaks both Swahili and English, and sometimes even Italian or German, depending upon the guide that we get. And these guys are experts. They know their animals like the back of their hand. They see things well before any of us are ever going to see them. And they're all also in constant contact with the other guides who are there as well via walkie-talkie. And so if somebody else is seeing something in a part of one of the parks that we're visiting, and we're not in that area at that time, we'll get the call to hightail it over to that location to be able to be ready to take the best possible photos. But the added bonus for us is the fact that we have some absolute world-class photographers, for example, on our tours, that also are going to be able to share their knowledge about photography, about wildlife photography, about your camera settings, about your menus, about helping you with your autofocus systems, helping you get the best possible photos. And the cool thing about the rest of the group also is the fact that you're going to be with 4 other people who are passionate, avid amateur photographers. And so at least from the get-go, you're going to have that in common with them. You're going to be able to have something to talk about. You're going to be able to share your stories about your travels and your photography and what, why you're there and what's exciting to you and what you're looking forward to. And then also celebrate all the cool things that are going to happen throughout the course of that safari. So there's a lot of help that also happens, I find, when you have people with more experience in a group and people with less experience. So those who do have more help inadvertently, end up helping those who don't. It just becomes such a nice little intimate 5-person group community, and friendships are formed so quickly, and people are so willing to help each other out and make sure that everyone's getting the best possible photographs possible. The other added bonus to being on a photo safari, even if you're not a photographer, is if you bring an iPhone, our pro photographers are going to be able to help you take better pictures. You're going to be going to places where we're looking for the most special moments. We're not just going to go and look at an animal, do like a Griswold at the Grand Canyon, and then move on. We're going to stop, be patient, wait, because our guides also know that the good things that happen with wildlife photography require a lot of patience. So we'll sit and wait until something amazing is going to happen at the judgment of both the photography leader and the local safari leader as well. So you get, basically 2 leaders for the price of 1 in your group, and it's a very small, little, intimate group of four guests in each vehicle, which gives you a lot of elbow room to maneuver. If you have long lenses, no problem. You're going to get your shots. That's the key thing about this. But we also say that if you're a couple and one of the people is not a photographer in that couple, it's still a great experience for you to have if you have a pair of binoculars. You have everything that a non-photographic safari will have in our safari, with the added bonus of having all that great photography knowledge imparted to you.
Great. For people who want to go on a photo safari, regardless of whether they want to come on one of yours or one of the others, but what should they look for in terms of accommodation? I know there are different levels of accommodation. They can go from roughing it up a little bit to some really nice settings. So what are the characteristics that one should look for when looking at what the accommodation offers are?
That's all going to depend, I think, on the person, right? So some people have a very high standard of what they want in terms of accommodations, and they're going to want to stay at super 5-star resorts and camps that are going to pamper them and cater them at every single opportunity. But at the same time, I think there's a happy medium between these things, because you can also stay at hostels and much cheaper accommodations that basically give you a bed, a place to wash, and you're off in your vehicle the next day doing the safaris. You can self-drive, you can do other things like that, which I highly not recommend anybody do. The local guides are just so good at what they do, and it's such an added bonus and value to be able to have someone who's an expert at that it makes all the difference in the world. So for us, for example, we stay at luxury lodges and safari camps, which have full-on glamping tents with king-sized beds and Egyptian cotton sheets and hot and cold running water and good meals in the evenings, and it's a really nice experience. But we're spending a limited amount of time at these camps and lodges. So for me to bring something to the extent of having the rooms be of four-season standards, which we do in places like Jordan on our tours, I'm not going to do that in Africa simply because the cost would be extraordinary. And we're spending so much time in those vehicles, going out, photographing all day long, that to me, the most important thing is we've got a great place to sleep. We've got, hot and cold running water. We've got, good food to eat. And we have all of that. And the people who run these camps are just top-notch, wonderful, hospitable people, all local people from Tanzania. And I love that too. So our operators in Tanzania, it's a locally owned operator he's a great success story just himself, and what he's been able to do to be able to provide us with the kind of accommodations and vehicles and guides that we get. And if you want super 5-star, there definitely are ways to do that at a much higher price point than what we're offering. And if you want to do it, much cheaper, you can do it cheaper. I'm not going to lie, but I don't think you're going to get the quality that we're going to.
Yeah, I think in a nutshell, we can sum that as I mean, if you want to maybe find a place with a spa, I don't know if there are any in there, but if you can find it, I mean, you're probably not going to use it, to exploit it, right? You want to go out, stay out, and take photos and see the wildlife for as long as you can. I remember
at the camps, you're not going to find that where we stay, but at the lodges that we stay at, you certainly can. So you can get a massage, you can get you can get a manicure and pedicure, you can get all sorts of nice things happening. There are full bars, lounging areas. There's live music that's played, and dancing, cultural stuff that's really cool. So all of that is included as well in the tours that we do. And I like to mix that up too, so that, you can wash off that dust and from a hot day being out in the African plains. When we get back from some of these places, they give us those cold towels at the end of the day when we arrive at the camps and the hotels. And when you pack your face with it and take it off, it's going to be all the same color as, your safari shirt, which is like a tan or taupe, and they call that African makeup.
You talked about people before, and I wanted to ask if you think that including some people photography, with the local tribes, by the Masai Mara, or I don't know what others are there, is something that can enrich the experience of a photo safari?
Personally, I think so. I think that's really important to be able to, get out there and not just be doing the same thing every day, but to also have some contact with the local people. And the Maasai tribe that we visit, they're generous, kind, nice people. They'll do a welcome ceremony and dance for our group. They'll take the time to share a little bit about their way of life and their traditions. And they'll take, individuals or groups of 2 or 3 people, to inside their huts and explain to them how those work. And it's a completely mind-blowing experience to see how different life is for people who live in that kind of environment. And at the same time, we get a chance to photograph them. We get a chance to visit their little school, and hopefully make a few donations there and leave the place a little bit better than when we got there.
Okay, let's switch to a completely different issue, because we've got this question from a lot of people, and the issue of gear, especially what kind of equipment do you recommend? And I'm just going to get a question here from our chat, because it's very specific, and a lot of people asking about lenses. Like, please discuss lens choices. This is from Get Real JC. Do you really need a 600 millimeter, or you could use a 70 to 200 with a 1.4 converter? So what are your recommendations in terms of cameras and lenses and accessories?
So for the cameras, let's start with that. I've worked with Fujifilm and Canon cameras, and still do. And you're going to want a camera that's relatively high end. And in the end, you want something that's going to be able to have a fast motor on it to be able to get you rapid fire, because this is one of those situations where that is really handy. So I do an awful lot of travel and landscape photography where it's the complete opposite. And I'm on a tripod and I'm doing one click, or I'm bracketing one up and one down, and it's a very slow, meticulous kind of way of working. It's the opposite when you're shooting on a safari type of situation. So for cameras, you're going to want rapid fire. You're going to want strong autofocus that's going to be adaptable to the different kinds of situations that you're going to have on safari. So what you need to do is learn that autofocus system that your camera has. And I can't comment on all the cameras that are out there because I don't know them all. But I certainly would recommend doing something either, at the mid to high end range, even if you have to rent something for the week, 10 days that you're going to be out there. I think it's important to be able to have the proper gear. So starting with the camera, again, something that's going to be relatively fast in terms of your drive. And let's jump to the lenses now. I think for the lenses, that was a great question. And I think that's one that gets asked a lot, right? Is, do I need the 600? Do I need a 400 2.8 or 600 f4? It would be nice. I'll be honest, it's a very good lens to be able to have. Now, as we all know, there's much more versatility with the zoom lens. But when you're dealing with most zoom lenses of any length, you're going to be limited in terms of how fast that lens is. So you're going to be dealing with variable apertures, whereas on a prime lens like the 600 or 400 or 500, you're going to be dealing with a fixed, obviously, aperture, and it's going to be a faster, lens as a rule if you're going on the very high end, and that's great for being able to capture fast-moving action. So yes, it is important to be able to have a good fast lens, but can you get away with something not as fast? Absolutely. You don't have to have a $12,000 lens with you. That's just absolutely not true to say that you do need that.
And great to point out that people can always rent lenses. I mean, I'm not going to buy a 600 millimeter lens because I would probably only use it on a safari, and I could definitely rent it.
Yeah, several of our guests, each time we go out in these safaris, definitely don't own them, but they rent them, and they're extremely happy with the fact that that is a possibility because it's a great expense to get into.
Let me just maybe try to show if I can manage to do a screen share here to show some photos that you sent me.
Sure.
If you remember what kind of equipment, what kind of lenses they were taken with, because when I look at something like this one, you're either very close or with a very long lens. What's the case here?
So we're driving into the Ngorongoro crater in Tanzania this morning. That was foggy and very serene, and it was just a very mystical, magical kind of drive in through the fog into the craters where we're going to go and photograph the animals. And on the side of the road, there's this dense shrub. And as we were driving slowly, we saw a little rustling, and this lion just popped its head out. And we stopped. We had maybe 1 minute to be able to capture something, and I had my Fujifilm 100 to 400 lens on at that point in time, and that's not a very fast lens. And I had to shoot, I think it was around 3200 ISO. And I honestly got this thing printed last week, relatively large. And even at 3200 ISO, it's just stunning, the quality.
3200?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you can't be afraid of pumping up your ISO either on your cameras for this kind of stuff, because you do want to be able to get your shutter speed fast enough that any motion is not going to be blurred. So I think I shot about 10, 15 frames on this before he moved out of the way. And this is the only one that was in focus properly from, nose to eye to ears. And just as luck would have it, also, it's the best one out of all of those in terms of the expression and everything else that came along. So I'm really grateful and happy to be able to have this picture to share. It's one of my favorites of the last year, of all my photography that I've done in the last year. And it's a great memory as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. Let me just underline a couple of points that you made. And one is this being, so it was relatively close, and you were with a kind of a long focal length, right?
But I don't think I was at the extent of being at the long end of the, 100 to 400.
It was relatively close, but still, when you're shooting, and we're shooting at that distance with a long focal length, your depth of field can be very thin.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? So if you're not careful, you might have the tip of the nose in focus and the eyes and the ears out of focus, or the ears in focus and the eyes not in focus.
This is where I think you sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
You sacrifice the ISO, and by going high, so that you can make sure that you can have, fast shutter speed to make it as sharp as possible. And, again, you're going to be in the morning at this time, you're going to have to be keeping your fingers crossed that your focus is bang on. So even for something like this, your autofocus, if it's set properly and you're nailing that midpoint between the nose and the eyes, you should have everything in focus, even at a pretty wide open camera or a pretty wide open lens.
Yeah, so I've seen people make this mistake where in order not to have too high an ISO because they're worried of noise, they will either have too shallow a depth of field or too slow a shutter speed, and then either out of focus parts of the image, or blurry because of camera shake or subject movement. And
Absolutely.
it's my main tip here is to definitely sacrifice the ISO. Very few people will notice the noise. A lot of people will see motion blur, for instance. So.
And to be honest, we're looking at what a lot of us now call Facebook quality, right? In terms of the photos that you want to share. If you're sharing on Instagram, it's going to be a tiny little photo that you need. If it's on Facebook, it's going to be a bit bigger. And for those people who really want to print, yeah, you'll need, higher megapixel camera. Not even necessarily, I'd say, because this is a 24 megapixel camera, and on the X-T2 that I shot this on, and blowing it up even to 40 by 60 is absolutely not a problem.
Yeah.
So there's even that megapixel myth where people think that they need much higher megapixels than they'll ever need. And that's just not true. And the noise, you're right. You don't have to worry about that anymore. The sensors are so good today, on all of the cameras. And, the Sonys are extremely good in terms of low light. Nikons and Fujifilms have really high dynamic range in terms of what they can deliver. And, every camera system out there is just so much better than even 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. We're really lucky to live in this age of photography.
Let's look at this one, because again, I probably, where is it? I know, there, 1 second. Yeah, you were either, again, pretty close or with a long lens.
So that's going to be a long lens, and boy, I'd say probably a good 70 meters away, at least. There's and this is a point where I think you want that long lens to be able to blur out the background in order to be able to just focus and concentrate on the subject matter. These little guys, there were several of them there, and this was just the cutest of all of them. He kept hamming it up for everyone and changing, those big clunky paws and putting them under his chin and next to his face and yawning and all those fun things. And then you're distracted too by the fact that there's so many different ones. So that's where patience comes in with this too. With that long lens, you're going to zoom into something that's more focused and concentrated when there's a ton of other things going on beside you that you're going to be distracted by a little bit. So that lens, by looking through the camera, again, you're going to have much better concentration on that one thing you want to be able to photograph. You might miss a couple things that are happening next to you, but you have to pick and choose. So yeah, this is done with again that 100 to 400 millimeter lens, most likely with a 1.4 converter on that as well.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, we can say that the 70 to 200, and even with a teleconverter, is great. You can get a lot of photos, but sometimes you need something a little bit longer if you can get it. It's probably
suggest getting longer, to the point where that is a wonderful lens. Those 70 to 200s are the equivalents in the crop sensors. They're fantastic lenses. They're fast. They're always the best secondary lens, I think.
Yeah.
So if I could recommend 3 lenses to bring, and I think you probably even would like to have a 4th one. So the 3 that I would recommend, if you can afford, one of those super long telephoto primes, that's great. If you can't afford it, don't worry about it. Get something like a mid-range 100 to 400 with a variable aperture, and your price range goes down drastically, and you can still get fantastic photographs with that kind of a lens. The second one or third one would be definitely the 70 to 200, and I'd stay around the 2.8. But even the f4 on that one is a lot of companies make an f4 version of that. It's a great lens to have as well. And your standard, 24-70 equivalent, that's just your go-to lens for so many things. You may not pull it out as much as you think you'd like to, or you think you would, because really, not on all of the locations that we get to are we able to get off-road to be able to get close to the animals. So that's where those long lenses come in again. But every once in a while, you want that wider field to it because you want to include some of the scenery. And we'll get to some of those images in a second where I'll show you that as well.
Yeah, sure. And then you have those long lenses, and then you have the problem of holding them and stabilizing them. So what are the best solutions? Tripod, monopod, gimbal head, what else?
So that's actually one of my favorite things to talk about on Safari, because I would say none of those are necessary, and I would absolutely discourage for people to bring a tripod, because you'll never use it. I promise you, you'll never use it on a Safari inside the vehicle. It will be cumbersome and impractical, and it'll get in the way of not just everybody else, but it'll get in your way as well. So leave the tripods at home. And this is from a guy who loves using his tripod for most of the work that he does, but I don't even bring a tripod with me when I go to Tanzania. The next thing was monopod. Again, same thing. You're not going to need it, and I'll explain why in a sec. And the third one was a gimbal. So there are specialty gimbals that are made for safaris, and while I can understand that people think that this would be a good idea, again, I'm going to tell you that I think it's limiting. Unless you're going alone and have a gimbal on each side of the vehicle attached to the roof and can move quickly from one to another, because the action could be changing sides of the vehicle at any time. If you just have one gimbal and need to unfasten it, move, bring it over to the other side, fasten it, reattach your camera with an extra long lens on it, by the time that happens, your animals are long gone. And that makes absolutely no sense. So to give yourself the best fighting chance, we use bean bags, which are perfect. So there's bars all around the top of the Safari vehicle. Place your bean bag on top of that, and then you place your lens on the bean bag, and it cushions it, cradles it, and it's super, super stable. And so most cameras, if not cameras, at least lenses now, and especially the long lenses, have image stabilization in them. And that's the best combination. Image stabilized cameras and lenses along with a beanbag. Pick up your beanbag, move to the other side of the vehicle, boom, you're set to go. All the other stuff gets in your way.
I think we will get to this, but let me just add that we have questions. We had more than one question about getting a little bit different images.
Sure.
The things that you can get at a zoo, and yet another photo of a lion. And in my opinion, you get really different images when you get some action in the shots. Something's happening. Might be a kill, might be an interaction between animals. And if those animals are moving, you need a fast shutter speed anyway. And a tripod or monopod is not going to help you in any way in those situations, right?
Again, just think of it. You're in a restricted area with other people around. You've got seats on the ground, and you've got a tripod with you that you're going to have to try and find a way to put the 3 legs down. There's no room to do that. And even if you do, it's not going to be stable because you'll probably have one of the legs on a cushioned seat. So again, just impractical. Second of all, monopod, same kind of a deal. It's just attached to your camera. It's cumbersome to move around and be flexible when you're trying to pan and find something, of interest that's in motion. Gimbals, again, unless you're the only one in the vehicle and have 2 of them and you're able to jump quickly from side to side, it just doesn't make sense. So those bean bags are perfect. You can swivel, pick up the camera, handhold easily, put it back down on the bean bag. You can turn it on the bean bag as well. And there's nothing holding it down to that bean bag, which is just perfect. And an extremely cheap solution to all of those problems.
I guess you would provide them, or people have to bring them from home.
We do provide bean bags in the vehicles. If people want to bring, their own custom big honking one, then they're more than welcome to do it. But there's definitely a bean bag for everybody in our vehicles. And
the advantage is you can bring it from home if you have it, and it just folded and empty, and then you just
we'll fill
it with sand on the spot, right? It doesn't add much weight to your luggage. True. So we mentioned focus. Well, again, we got questions about getting sharp focus. What are your best tips and recommendation for getting sharp focus on those critters?
Yeah, so I think I've brushed on that a little bit already in terms of go with the high ISO. If your camera has 50, 100, 200 as its base ISO, don't even think about putting it onto any of those throughout the whole time that you're going to be on Safari. Really, it's just not going to be of any benefit to you. 400, 800 should be where your kind of average is in terms of trying to increase your shutter speed to be able to get a faster shutter speed. I think that's the thing that's important is things are moving. And even if it's just moving slowly, just a tiny little bit of motion at 60th of a second is not going to help you get a sharp image. It's going to be to your detriment. So give yourself every best fighting chance to have the highest possible shutter speed. And the second tip, I think, is really learn how to use your AF system on your camera. So the time to learn is not while you're on Safari. One of the best tips I can give is go on a YouTube. Type in your camera model into YouTube and autofocus, and you will find tutorials on there exactly how to set it up for your purposes. Now, there's different ways to use autofocus. There's ways to track things. There's ways if you're stable on a tripod and something's moving into your scene. There's ways to have the subject matter being tracked while you're panning, and even if it goes behind a tree or something stable, it will keep tracking that thing that's in motion. So there's different, and every camera company calls these things something different. So you need to do your research ahead of time. If you're going to go on a trip like this, it could be a trip of a lifetime. It's, I think, everyone's responsibility as a photographer to get a little bit of knowledge before you go, and then make sure that you, again, have the best chance of getting those great shots.
Yeah, my Fujifilm, I shoot Fujifilm like you. We're not, of course, trying to promote Fujifilm here, but it has the AF tracking. Has like 6 or 7 different AF tracking modes, and you can also have a custom one. And I don't know what all of those do, because most of the time I shoot static subjects. If I come on a Safari, of course, I will have to learn them. Here we cannot give a detailed tutorial about shooting the AF modes of every single camera on the market, even of just a single model. It would be impossible. But yeah, we
tend to not know everything either, and I'll be the first one to admit that I am happy to have YouTube as a resource when I need to learn something, whether it's about photography or Photoshop or anything that I need a little bit of a quick brush up on that I'm not super familiar with, because I like to try different things. And that's the joy about photography, is you really never stop learning. And you can't assume that you're going to have the camera do everything. It's a tool, like a computer. The camera is only as intelligent as the person that programs it and is using it. And the more familiar you are with that camera, the more you practice, the better you become. Just like being a violinist, if you don't practice, you're not going to get better. Same applies to photography.
We have a question here from Mark, who says manual focus not wise. And I think I would personally never use manual focus in such a situation.
I don't see any purpose for manual focus on a Safari like this, when the autofocus systems are so good today and things are moving. I use manual focus and focus peaking on the Fuji system all the time, because it works amazingly well in terms of the nature and landscape photography I do, in terms of the cityscape photography that I do. When I want to be sure that everything is going to be in focus and I'm on a tripod and I have all the time in the world, then manual focus, I love it. But here, no.
Get more pictures, just going on continuous shooting with continuous AF tracking, and you're bound to get at least a few sharp. We hope.
Spray and pray. It's kind of like that to a good degree, and you will get, like you say, you get some good shots out of doing that, and that's everybody who's a photographer. I don't care if you've been doing this for 25 years or if you've been doing it for the last 2 weeks. It's just a technique that in this kind of a situation does come in handy, is your friend, and use those cameras at a high motor drive speed to be able to get as many shots as possible. When there's this chaos going on in front of you, and we're going to take a look at a few more shots later on, I'll jump into that and show you where that comes in really handy.
Yeah. Maybe you want to point me to one in particular?
If you go to some of them, like let's say where they're crossing the river.
Is it in this set here? Yeah, like this one.
There we go. Yeah, so that to me, that just blows me away. The memory that I have of this crossing. So during the August time in Tanzania, you will have hundreds of thousands of wildebeest that cross the Mara River that are heading up into Kenya and then come back and cross it again. Zebra as well, obviously. And this crossing in particular lasted about 15 to 20 minutes. And there were thousands of wildebeest and zebra just crossing. The sound, the smell, the splashing of the water, everything was just happening so quickly. And then you have to decide, do I want a wide shot? Do I want a zoomed in shot? And what I love about this one is the fact that all the wildebeest are in one area, all the zebra are in another area. They're completely separate, but it works beautifully together. And I was shooting like crazy on high speed, 11 or so frames per second, just trying to get something that was going to work. And if you look at the zebra in particular in this shot, what I like about it is the fact that there's not one of them that's got its face, or any encumbrances in front of any of the faces. And yet they're also still all very separate. There's action going on. And I have hundreds of shots that I took during, this one particular crossing. Hundreds and hundreds of shots, actually. But I need that one. And, this just ended up being that one that I fell in love with.
Which makes me think of a recommendation that I would like to give. And it is, do not save on memory cards, right? Bring as many memory cards as you can, because you will take in thousands and thousands of shots. And you don't want to fill up your memory cards and then waste time trying to delete photos to make space for new ones, and risk deleting the good ones and so on. And just bring more than you think you need.
And bring fast cards, right? Because you're going to be shooting at a high speed and you don't want your camera buffering as magic is happening in front of you. That is a facepalm kind of situation that you just absolutely want to avoid. So the two things, well, and let's jump into one third thing too. So with regards to memory cards, yes, bring lots of them, bring fast ones. And the next thing is bring lots of batteries, because you do not want to run out of batteries. Yeah. These new cameras, especially with the EVFs in them today, require a lot of batteries, and usually the ones with the EVFs have the smaller batteries. So it's a double-edged sword on that. You might have a lighter, easier to manipulate camera, but the batteries aren't going to last as long. I bring about 8 spare batteries for my X-T2, and I'm really happy I have them.
Yeah, sure. Good point. Let's keep talking about equipment, but not photographic equipment specifically, but other kinds of equipment. I have a question here. And before we do, and we were still talking about bean bags, Madeleine here said that airline neck pillows work too. So I have one that I always bring with me when I travel on a plane. So that's thanks, Madeleine, for the tip.
That will work. It just, the center part of it, I can understand. It just, maybe if you tied it together and made it and scrunched it up. But again, don't worry. Most safari vehicles are going to have bean bags for you, even if you forget your pillow.
So a question from where is that? Mark, about temperatures in August in Tanzania specifically, and so what clothes to bring.
That's a good question, because we always think of Africa as being crazy hot and tropical or subtropical, and there's a lot of different temperature variances on the tour that we do in August, and even the ones in February and March. So layers, I always recommend layers no matter what for everyone. So and here's a great tip that I learned the first time I went on safari is there's a reason why they wear the tans and that kind of clothing on safari, because I brought a lot of blue and black stuff to wear. And as we were driving along, at so many different places, we see these swatches of material on the ground, blue and black stripes. And eventually I asked my guide driver, what are those for? Why do they put them on the ground like that? And he goes, oh, because the tsetse flies love black and blue, and we spray poison on them to kill the tsetse flies. So I was basically just a big tsetse fly magnet, not knowing it. So the next time, definitely didn't wear any blues like this, and left the black clothes at home. And in the mornings, it can be quite cold, so you're going to want to bring a jumper, a jacket, something that's going to be nice and toasty, because we're getting up before sunrise, and no matter what, when there's no sun in the sky, it's going to be cooler. During the middle of the day, it's going to be quite warm, as a rule. We hope for clouds as well, but we can't control that yet. And so it can get quite warm during the course of the day. Let's say, high 20s, even low 30s, but I'd say more mid to high 20s. So it's very easy to take that jacket off and have another long sleeve layer and then have a t-shirt.
So khaki as a color works well.
Works well. And, it's easy to match with other things of that nature as well. And then you also look like a safari person.
True. I would like to talk a bit about issues more specifically photographic, like composition.
Sure.
And we've got some questions. Let me see if I can find it again. Tamara asked, finding a way to create unusual images. And there was another question about composition somewhere I can find. So apologies for not being able to find it, but there was a couple of questions about composition. And I'm just going to, I can just say that there are many ways to do it. This is a great composition. I like, as you said, the fact that the zebras, their gaze is unencumbered, unobstructed by other zebras, and you have this separation between the zebras and the wildebeest. And of course, well, you cannot control it, so you spray and pray, and you pray that you get a good composition, because with the animals moving, especially in a group, is not easy. So that can be I think. And I see you also have great shots from kind of a wide composition.
Yeah, so this is a great example, I think, of composition that can be a little bit out of the ordinary in terms of what people would think about for wildlife, because again, these three male brother lions were all lying under this one tree, and they were basically just sprawled out, laying down, and it was boring, and there was nothing to do about it. So we waited and waited and waited. And I was just keeping my fingers crossed, hoping that, they would get up and I'd see all of their faces at once, that they wouldn't be one in front of the other. But what made it special was this beautiful acacia tree. And I think we really relate this kind of a tree that looks like this to Serengeti, to Africa, to the plains of Africa. And, that can be from, the nature show on PBS that has this tree as its logo, or it can be, from The Lion King, where, we see that in the cartoons, or just watching National Geographic specials and seeing those beautiful trees. But then to have the lines underneath it, I made sure that I went with a much wider lens at this point. I think I was even using my 10 to 24 on the Fuji, which is basically like a 1635 on the full, crop sensor, full uncropped sensor. And I love that. I love the fact that the tree frames these beautiful lines. The clouds work well, and nothing is touching on the edges either. So the full tree is in there. Nothing is being cut off. And again, I think I had one or two frames out of dozens and dozens that I shot on this that actually worked out. And it's a matter of being patient. So I think if there's, trying different lenses, not always going to the true and trusted, long lens to be able to get a close-up of the animal. It's okay if they're small in the frame. Think of it like this, like in terms of some of the nature and especially beautiful landscape photos. Having a little tiny human figure in that image to give it scale also will make that photograph so much better so much of the time. And it also allows you to put yourself into that image and think, oh my God, that could be me in that beautiful landscape. Here, it's to me, it's these beautiful lines that are small, but they're majestic, and the wind is blowing in their hair. And even if I got them close up, I don't think this would be even remotely as good a picture, not even close.
Yeah, I love how it shows the expanse of the plains of the, was that the Serengeti, or?
That is in the Serengeti, yes.
I would like to pop this one up. it's a close-up, and I would like just to, underline the importance of having the animal here is partly obscure, but it's its hind part. We don't care much about that. We see beautifully that the head of the animal without any obstructions, with the eye shot.
That's one of my favorites from last year, and this was an incredible scene for many reasons. And some of the guests, and including the other leader on that tour, Patrick DeFruscia, got these great shots of this leopard cub with the mom, who had an antelope in the tree, and they were eating the antelope. And Pat even has some really cool video of that. It's absolutely spectacular. And I don't think I got nearly as good a shot of the two of them together with the antelope, but I was focused so much on this young leopard that I was following it as it moved away from the kill in the tree, and it jumped down onto this branch, and I zoomed in closer, and I got one of my favorite shots from last year. So again, waiting, being in the right position at the right time, having the trees framing the animal properly, doing some work in post. I added some blur in post on the edges just to give it a little bit more zoom concentration into the animal, darken the edges a bit with a bit of a vignette. And so there's another way to add some drama and to make your images stand out, is to just get better at Photoshop and Lightroom or Capture One or all of them, and learn how to edit your image, to the point where it does stand out from the other images that are out there. And we're living in such a great age, again, to be able to have this wonderful software to work with, that to not use it is kind of crazy. We're really fortunate to be able to manipulate images to the point where we can bring out detail, we can increase sharpness, we can add drama to them, we can desaturate, we can turn them into black and white like this. To me, this is the magic of having a good computer with great software.
I see that you, where is that? I see that you like you have a preference for kind of centered compositions, right? Kind of symmetrical, slightly off, but you're not a religious follower of the rule of thirds. So.
I don't think you can be a religious follower of any rule. Rules are made to be broken, right?
So I think
the rule of thirds is a great rule. Don't get me wrong. It's like I would never fight against it. And until you just said this, I didn't even realize that so many of these images that I had sent you are centered. But at the same time, if you look at this, there is a rule of thirds that's applied.
Actually, there is. Yeah, I was saying the same.
1/3 on the right and 1/3 in the middle. But the line is definitely centered.
Yeah. But I just wanted to say, kind of tongue-in-cheek that any composition works. There is no specific composition rules for wildlife and safaris. Just
good is good, right?
Apply what you have learned. And
if you like the shot and it's good, it's a good shot.
And alternate. It's great to have a long lens. It's great to be able to come in really close to see the animal's gaze really, and all the detail in the fur and so on. But as we saw before, it's also great to alternate with wider shots. So do a little bit of everything. You don't have to stick to one compositional trick.
Variety is the spice of life, and that includes, so much of what we do in photography. And to me, it's not just in terms of how you see things. Let's say here on safaris, like, change your lenses, change your perspective on things. Don't be afraid to take a chance here and there. If you have something that's incredible that's going on in front of you, of course, take less chances and get that epic shot that you want. But if you have time, definitely practice, try. You never know. So often I find that I'll take a photograph and think, oh my God, that's going to be the best one of the day. And at other times of the day, I'm taking just because I'm there. When I get back home and I start looking through the images and start editing them, oftentimes I'm more excited about the ones that I didn't even think twice about than the ones that I had such high hopes for. So never, I think it was Wayne Gretzky that said, you miss, all the shots that you don't take. So don't be afraid of taking lots of pictures.
And coming to this, would you recommend taking pictures at all times of the day? Because we have a question here from Jerry, who asks, do you go out at first light and stay out until last light? because he thinks that being out in good light is extremely important to him. And he sees so many safari photos taken in contrasty light at midday, which I assume is not a good thing.
So that's a great question, because I'm a huge fan of taking a break at midday for the kind of work that I do when I'm traveling, in cities and doing cultural stuff, because it's just a terrible time of day to photograph. The light is just harsh and bad, and the color temperature is rotten. And if you're shooting people, you're getting, nose shadows, eye socket shadows. It's just absolutely terrible. But there's also ways around all of that. And in the case of the safaris, for example, if you have clouds, you're shooting all day long, because that can be, clouds are nature's big softbox and can allow you to take really beautiful photos at any time of day. And I would not want to travel to Tanzania and spend just a few hours in the morning and a few hours in the afternoon photographing, because you're never sure what you're going to see, when you're going to see it. And if there's something happening in front of you that is just majestic and epic, well, for example, we take a look at something like the shot of the zebra crossing with the wildebeest. Now, I don't think that was taken very early in the morning. I think it was closer to 10:30, 11, getting close to midday. It might have been a little bit cloudy, but even if it was contrasty, then I'm going to start getting the splash of the water being a little bit more prominent, because the light is going to capture all the little droplets of water. So I don't think there's a bad time of day to photograph wildlife. You will take bad photographs all day long, but you have the opportunity also, I think, to take great photographs all day long.
Yeah, and you cannot just tell those zebras to not sleep in and cross the river early in the morning.
Cue the giraffe. Not going to happen.
So I'm going back a little bit to equipment, because there are literally a lot of questions about equipment. And I want to take this one from, I think it's Jerry again, about do you think full frame is really necessary? And I would like to answer that, it's not necessary to me. I have a crop sensor camera. You do too. And you get that 50% extra reach in a smaller body. So I think that crop sensors cameras nowadays maybe have an advantage.
Absolutely.
In a safari.
And some of the higher end cameras on the full frame sensor will also have a crop sensor switch. It's a firmware thing where you can switch to the crop to be able to get the crop sensor, but it's not the same kind of feel. It's just using a smaller part of your sensor. So yeah, I think the crop sensors are fantastic. Do you need full frame for anything? I've always said, bigger is not better in terms of a sensor. Better is better. So if your sensor is just better, it's a better sensor. Just because it's bigger doesn't mean too much. Now, you're going to be able to get, I've shot with the Fujifilm, for example, the GFX, big medium format sensor, certainly not appropriate for safaris, but it certainly is appropriate for a lot of other work that I do. The crop sensors allow me, let's say, for example, with that 100 to 400 millimeter lens, I put a 2x converter on that. It's going to slow it down quite substantially, but I'm going to have the equivalent of a 1200 millimeter at full extension. That's a pretty long lens, and that's going to be longer than most people have, even with their big primes, unless they've got the 600 with the 2x on it, right?
Yep, exactly. There's another question about carrying two bodies. Do you recommend it? Maybe having two different lenses and quickly switching between them?
Absolutely. There's no quick way to be able to switch a lens when something incredible is happening in front of you. And let's say you're photographing an elephant and it's coming closer and closer and closer and closer. Well, at a certain point, that long zoom that you have is just not going to be the best choice of equipment to have in your hands. And if you have a 24-70 attached to a second body, or even a 70 to 200, you're at least going to be able to get something a little bit wider. And so I definitely suggest bringing two bodies at all times. Plus, you're traveling all that way. If one camera body malfunctions, oh my, what do? Well, you have backup. Backups are good.
Good. Enough with equipment, unless we get more questions. We're always happy to take them. I'm listening to people talk about wildlife photography, whether it's in safaris or not. I learned about the importance of anticipation, being able to understand the behavior of an animal, which of course is not easy in just a few days, but being able to observe and anticipate what the animal is going to do is going to be the difference between taking a great shot and missing it, maybe. What do you think?
Anticipation, patience, these are all things that I think that need to be learned by impatient people like me. I'm certainly not the most patient person in the world, and yet this is a great Zen exercise in being able to do just that, because you're going to be in a place where you're most likely not going to have, Wi-Fi connection or LTE or whatever it is that your phone is going to get. So put that aside. You're going to try to be, to sound silly, at one with nature and absorb those beautiful moments that are happening and let it happen. So sometimes the shot will come to you and you just have to be prepared. So that's your point of anticipation. I think that's vital. Getting to a place, and I see this oftentimes when, and again, a good comparison to our first topic, which was, non-photo safaris versus photo safaris. We'll see so many of the non-photo safari vehicles in the field spend just brief moments at a location where animals have the potential to do such interesting things, and they just move on to the next thing. And that's fine by me, because that means more latitude for our groups to be able to maneuver, get the best angles, get the best positions, and be patient enough to get those fantastic images.
I think that's also can be an answer to what Tamara was asking, right? About finding unusual images when one is restricted from leaving the vehicle. Another shot of a lion is not at all interesting, yes, but if you have the time to wait for the lion to do something, and you're lucky enough to the lion is going to do something, then that will get you a more interesting shot than the lion just resting.
The difference can be a split second when it comes to animals, and that's the key factor, I think. So yes, another photograph of a lion laying down and having marginal light on it is dull, but should that lion get up and shake its head and have wind blowing through it and have the sun, backlighting it, or having it roar, or yawn, or having it stand on its haunches, I mean, again, that could last for 1 second, for less than 1 second. And if you're ready, you're the one that's going to get that shot.
Yeah, so it's really important to be able to spend enough time in observing an animal. We know that lions like to rest most of the day. They're not as active as many people think. They're not hunting all the time. Most of the time, they're just there.
But this is why we get up in the morning as well. That's a great point. And I'm glad you brought that up. So this is one of the vital reasons why we get up, at 5 o'clock in the morning, so that we're out, well ahead of sunrise or at sunrise, because some of the parks don't even allow you to get out there until sunrise. But then we're right in the thick of it because our camps are right in the middle of the national parks as well, which is awesome. So yeah, the activity that happens is when the cooler weather is there, when the sun is lower to the ground, when the animals aren't going to overheat, especially the big cats. A cheetah running can literally, end up killing itself if it, overheats and is in harsh sunlight. It can be very harsh, and we'll feel it too. All of our vehicles have canopies over the top of them to prevent us from getting sunstroke, which is fantastic. The animals don't have this, and you'll see this is why those lines are actually under the shade, where they were under that acacia tree, and they're panting and sleeping, and just like your house cats, they're lazy, and they're going to be lazy, and you have to be ready.
Okay, we have a question here from where is that? From Terry, about the best time of the year to go and best places to see animals in addition to Tanzania. But I know you're kind of the expert on Tanzania specifically, but even Tanzania itself has a lot of different areas and parks which have their own peculiar characteristics. So
even
maybe explain,
yeah. So
Serengeti, Ngorongoro.
The beauty of Tanzania and the national parks in Tanzania is the fact that nowhere else on earth do you have the extent of the Great Migration and the amount of animals that are involved in that Great Migration. The only other Great Migration that I think still exists in the world is the caribou Great Migration that takes place up in northern Canada and Alaska. And it certainly does not have a variety of animals that we're going to be able to see in Tanzania. So at different times of year, you have different things that happen in Tanzania. So for example, in August, the Great Migration, like we were looking at those pictures, crosses the Mara River, and you get all these opportunities to see the river crossings. And you'll see everything from the just plain splashing and crazy, cacophony of thousands of animals crossing, but you'll also see in the midst of them, you'll see hippo and other animals, in the water, and that can make for some cool shots. One of the crazier things is you'll see crocodiles lunging out and actually taking down some of the wildebeest or zebra. And while that's not always a fun thing to see, it's the circle of life, and this is just nature taking course. And we don't even go, let's say, for example, during the calving season safari that we do in February and March, we don't go to the northern part of the Serengeti because that's not where the herds are. We will follow the herds, and the herds will be in the southern part of the Serengeti. And what happens there is they're giving birth at that time of year. And during the course of late January, February, and early March, 8,000 wildebeest a day are being born in that part of Tanzania. So, and also you're having antelope and gazelle and zebra births happen. So that attracts the predators, and the predators themselves will have babies at that time of year. So very different things that are happening at different times of year.
Yeah, I've been to South Africa. I've been to South Africa in the winter. When it's winter in the Southern Hemisphere, it's summer here in Europe, in the Northern Hemisphere. And it's a great season because there is not a lot of vegetation, because it's dry season. So you can see animals relatively easy because they're not hidden by the tall grass. But on the other hand, the summer has its own things. I was talking with a guy who frequently goes to Botswana, which is another great destination. He goes to the Okavango Delta River, and there you go in the dry season because with the dry season is when the delta is flooded, because it's the wet season in another part of Africa where the river originates, and so all the waters come down there. So I guess that every country has its own,
Absolutely. So one of the cool things that we do in February and March as well that we cannot do in August is that our drivers are actually allowed to drive off-road and get close up to the animals. They're outside of the national park areas, or the actual boundaries of the park, but they're still in the national park areas. So we are then allowed to drive much closer up to the animals, which then again, if you're asking about how to take more dynamic and more interesting photos, this offers us an opportunity to get closer, shoot them with wider lenses, and that's going to make for some really cool photography as well. So again, different things at different times a year, depends what you're looking for. We actually have one guest that came with us in August, hi Biz, who's also coming with us in March because she loved it so much in August, but wanted to see something different in terms of what is going to be available, photo op wise, that she signed up right away to come in March when we were discussing with that, with our tour leaders and our guides in August. So I'm excited to have someone actually who's also going to be able to see the difference and tell that, to her friends and family as well.
Just getting a couple more questions here. A very specific one from Mark, who asks about voltage and adapters required for chargers.
So your chargers are all going to be multi voltage chargers.
Yeah.
You have no problem. You just need an adapter, and that's very simple. You just anywhere you're going in the world, that's all you're going to need. So if you buy one of the multi adapters, you're usually pretty good. There's only a few places in Africa and other places in the world, maybe India, where you're going to need very specific ones. And wherever you're traveling to, you just use Google as your friend. Type in your destination, electrical sockets, and you'll get the information that you need in terms of what you'll need.
My personal recommendation is always to bring at least two adapters, multi-adapters. One is because you might have to plug in different devices, or you bring a power strip, but two adapters are generally fine.
Power strip, That's a great tip.
The second reason why I always bring two adapters is because I invariably end up leaving one at some hotel. And then you don't want to be fine. Oh, yeah, get to another place, open your bag, and where is my adapter? And now I'm lost. So
many of the places now, the hotels that I'm traveling to, are having the multi plugs, so they'll take pretty much any plug from anywhere in the world, which I think it's about time. I wish we could obviously all be, all in the same electrical, system that everything worked everywhere, but that's still not the case. But at least the plugs are getting a little bit easier. Buy one of those multi adapters and have at least one of those, and bring a travel power strip. That's a great point, Hugo.
Another question was about flash use, but I see that many of our listeners here already replied, no, don't bring flash.
You can actually bring a flash. A very high-powered flash can actually be one of those things, and I have not had anyone bring one yet on a tour. I personally would rather not have anyone have one, simply because it can freak the animals out, and then if the animal ends up running away, that is disappointing for the rest of the group. However, some wildlife photographers will use this if they're alone, and they want to get that one very specific shot. And they're not going to be a hindrance to anybody else that they're with. So my suggestion is do not bring a flash. And that's simple etiquette, not because you're not going to be able to use it to get good pictures. It's the same thing as taking photos with a flash in midday of people. That's a great idea because you're getting rid of a lot of the shadows and then horrible light that's coming from overhead, and you're balancing that light to make it look softer. The same thing happens with the animals. But again, my suggestion is do not bring one.
Another question from Oedipus. Do you need a lens filter? I would like to say I would definitely bring polarizer for when I want to shoot landscapes, but I don't think you need a filter for shooting animals. Just get in the way. I mean, you can bring a clear lens filter just to protect the lens, right? One of those UV.
I'm a big fan of neutral density filters for many reasons, including the fact that I have a filter kit that I promote. From Format High Tech, but at the same time, this is not one of those places that you're going to use, neutral density filters. Even the polarizer, there's obviously, going to be a few opportunities to get some kind of landscape pictures, but since you're not able to get out of the vehicles, don't expect that you're going to be able to get epic landscape photos on this kind of a trip because of the fact you may be eaten. You don't want to get out of the vehicle unless the guide says it's okay, and then it's only in very specific areas, where we know we're safe. But it's unfortunate. There's a lot of beautiful trees and rock formations that it's heartbreaking to drive by and not be able to get up close to them with a wide-angle lens and get those dramatic shots. But it's just not possible. We're also not allowed to drive off-road.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we answered a lot of questions. I don't know if you have any other, but I invite everyone to just use the chat here on YouTube, or just email us. Just reply to the messages, to the emails that you get announcing this. And if anyone joined late, it was already started, you will get an email with a link where you can watch the replay. So thanks for everyone for watching. But before we finish here, do you want to talk a little bit about the safaris where you will be leading? You talked about the calving season. You talked about the Great Migration. So it would be great for people who really want to experience those events, those great phenomena of nature firsthand and photograph them. What can you tell about it?
Well, I've been running photography tours for many years now, all over the world, in Japan and Jordan and Iceland and Norway, and now in Tanzania and Myanmar and other places. I'm just, in love with seeing so many beautiful things in the world. But what has touched me more than anything, I find, are these safaris, because they're ever changing and there's never the same moment twice. It touches your soul. These animals are beautiful, they're majestic, they're free, and we sadly may be, one of the last generations to really experience this kind of thing in the grand fashion that we're able to do it today. So I would encourage anyone and everyone to, if they have any kind of wish to be able to see this kind of a thing, to do it sooner rather than later. it's moved me beyond, what words can even express. And I always say thank goodness that's why we have cameras, so we can share all those beautiful moments that, are unfolding in front of us. And so Discovery, my company Discovery, runs two different safaris during 2 different times a year. One you'll see on the screen right now is during the calving season, which I've explained a little bit earlier on about. We're able to drive off-road. We're able to get close up to the animals, photograph them with wider lenses. We're able to see lots of baby animals. So if you're into the cuteness factor and you want to see, baby zebra and wildebeest and antelopes and gazelles, you're definitely going to see that. You're also going to be able to see more little baby lions and leopards and hyenas and cheetah and all the predators that are going to be out there as well. They're also having their cubs at that time of year. And it's just a great season also to have more potential to see dramatic things like hunts. So you will see the big cats attacking, easier prey, which are the younger animals. And just being able to put all of that together into a 10-day experience, to me, is just absolutely mind-boggling. To be able to spend that much time seeing that much, new life and nature unfolding in front of you. It's going to be spectacular. We've got spots left on the February one right now, and I'm excited to get a couple more people signed up. So if you're interested, that's our good friend Patrick DeFruscia is going to be leading the February 16 to 25 calving season safari. And if anyone has any questions about that whatsoever, please feel free to contact us either through the Discovery Photo Tours website, which is discoveryphototours.com, or you can just write to us. Either me, Ken at discoveryphototours.com, or travel with us at discoveryphototours.com.
Yeah,
and second season.
Yeah, I'm just going to say I'm going to miss the February, March one because I have the Venice Carnival, which has its own kind of beasts there. But I'll be with you in August in Tanzania. I'll be
absolutely
leader of one of the vehicles there. So people want to join us there. It's going to be August 4 to 14, and then again 17 to 27, which is the Great Migration. So we're going to see those kind of scenes, those river crossings, and millions of animals roaming the plains of the Serengeti of Tanzania.
It is spectacular. You are so right. You say millions and millions, and that is a literal fact. So there are over 2 million wildebeest in Tanzania on this Great Migration, and you're not necessarily going to see them all in one day. But my God, there's going to be times where from just in front of you to as far as the eye can see to every corner, the landscape is dotted with wildebeest and zebra, and it just doesn't seem like this can even possibly be real. And you can drive through areas like this for 20, 30 minutes and still have that same kind of scene in front of you. It's just spectacular. We get a chance to also fly into the Serengeti and take these small planes, which is really cool to see from above all the, as we're arriving in Serengeti, to see the herds, and even, you may even be lucky enough to see a river crossing from the air. We stay in some really beautiful lodges and camps. And again, the food is good. The accommodations are luxurious. The drivers are exceptional and knowledgeable. And we've got a whole bunch of new leaders coming with us this year, including Hugo. And I'm thrilled to say that. We have Patrick DeFruscia coming with us again, Deborah Sandage, Glenn Lavender, Lee Varys, and Bobby Lane is coming with us as well. We're going to have a great August. It's going to be a month of safari. I just can't wait.
Yeah, and it's going to be a photo safari specifically, as we said. So we're going to take 4 guests per vehicle. So there's going to be a lot of room for shooting. You're not fighting elbow to elbow with other people. It's going to be 4 photographers. But I mean, if somebody is not a photographer, they will get a great experience as well, right?
Like I said earlier, yeah, the fact that we get a lot of couples that come with us is something that I really appreciate, that people feel like they can share this with their significant other. And it truly is one of those places in the world where you don't need to have a camera to enjoy yourself. It's as photocentric as you want it to be, because we're on the same path that the non-photo safaris are going to be on. But with the added bonus of having a little bit more time in places, being a little bit more patient, and a good pair of binoculars are going to be your best friend if you don't have a camera with you. And you will take back with you some incredible memories, absolutely incredible memories from this tour. And to be able to share that, with your husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, it's just, you can't get much more special than that. So again, we've got a lot of couples that are coming with us. We've got a full family coming with us in August as well. So there are 4 people coming and filling up one of my vehicles. So I'm really thrilled about that. When we have families coming with us, we had another family with us last August, super cool people, and they got a chance to share this amazing experience as a family. So again, if you have any questions about any of these tours, about safaris, about equipment, about anything that we do, please don't hesitate, reach out to us. We're always there and happy to reply, and we usually get back to you within 24 hours.
Yep, just go to discoveryphototours.com. That's all. So again, thanks everyone for attending, and send us any further questions. Thanks, Ken, for your time. I'll see you in Tanzania.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye now.